Well, thanks a lot for coming back on the show, Lon. Just for the listeners that didn't hear episode 5, do you want to give us like a super short biography?
Me give a short biography?
Super short.
Well, I was born in 1948 and started getting interested in all of this stuff during the 1960s. And as I mentioned in our last interview, my exposure to LSD in 1966 probably was a turning point in my interests, and I got interested in Eastern mysticism, and that eventually led me to the Western way, Kabbalah, and tarot, ceremonial magic, Aleister Crowley, and all that fun stuff.
Excellent. And today we're going to be talking to you about, mainly about your new book, which is a book about Enochian Vision Magick. I was wondering if you could just tell us, like, what kind of got you interested in this subject?
Well, it was in the early years of my involvement in the OTO. I was chartered a lodge of OTO back in 1978 in Costa Mesa, California, and part of my perceived duties was to have a weekly class, and that class has been going ever since then. Monday night class is still happening here at the house. But I thought it would be a good idea to try to stay at least 1 week ahead of the class in my magical studies. And after a couple of years of making sure everybody kind of got grounded in their pentagram and hexagram rituals and how those kind of translate to the Solomonic versions of those, I was running out of things to teach at class, and I had Regardi's at that time 2-volume set of the Golden Dawn, and I had Crowley's gems from the equinox, and I was thumbing through that, and I found the Enochian material in gems from the equinox, and it looked exotic enough and sexy enough, and I thought, well, maybe we'll study this for a couple weeks. And once I started studying it, the whole thing just completely went totally over my head. Had no idea what's going on. I sort of panicked that wasn't going to be able to even master the fundamentals enough to teach a class the following week. But I attempted to wrap my brain around what they were talking about, and I started an Enochian workshop where the class and I would more or less study the material from the Golden Dawn and Crowley, build the requisite temple furniture, and more or less all learn together this Enochian system. And so the class went on for several months while we were actually building the equipment, and that's kind of how I got started. I sort of committed myself to teaching something new.
So, Lon, if I could just interject there, we're talking about a system of magic called Enochian. Now, that was originally received by 2 men back in the Elizabethan era called Dr. John Dee, and Edward Kelly. Could you tell us a little bit about those 2 men and the work that they did?
Well, John Dee was a classic Elizabethan magus. He was arguably the smartest guy in England, arguably the smartest guy in the world at that time. And he was a brilliant young man. He came from, his father was a gentleman server to Henry VIII. He went off to Cambridge as I guess he was still in his teens, and within short order he was teaching there. And he was a brilliant mathematician, but he was a well-rounded magus that included every art and mechanical science, and in those days that included astrology and hermetics. And John Dee, well, first of all, he's one of the most interesting characters in history, period. I urge anybody just to Google John Dee and just see about his life in the non-magical realms. He was really quite a character.
And he was quite he was almost like a celebrity in his own day, because from what I've read, Shakespeare based the character of Prospero in The Tempest very much on him. So he was quite well known, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. And even when he was a very young man, and he published some books on mathematics, including a commentary on the propositions of Euclid, which is still taught today. He was like an academic rock star. He'd go to the continent and give lectures, and people were hanging from the rafters to hear him talk. I mean, they were everything short of throwing their mathematical panties on stage.
So tell us how he then went on to decide to work with this particular system of magic, and how it was received, and the partnership between himself and this rather roguish character Edward Kelly.
Well, when Elizabeth took over, and Dee was helpful in Elizabeth coming to power in the first place, but when she came to power, she asked him to, astrologically set the date of her coronation, and he was her counselor, her buddy. She trusted him, and she trusted him so much, and he traveled abroad so much, and he spoke all of the European languages so fluently that she enlisted his services as a spy, and he loved that. He loved that role, and he was known as the Queen's Eyes, and the little glyph that he would sign in secret dispatches was like a little cartoon of the Queen's Eyes, 2 zeros and a roof over the top, and it's sort of a slanting line coming down from the top towards the left. It was literally 007. He was the first 007 and arguably England's first great secret agent. And part of his spying technique was to develop more and more complex ciphers and codes so that he could send secret dispatches to Elizabeth without them being intercepted and interpreted. And he relished that role. And but being the visionary genius that he was, he wanted to spy for Elizabeth without having to get on a boat and go to Europe and traipse around the continent spying on people. He just wanted to sit in the comfort of his own house in Mort Lake and spy in remote view. He wanted to do that.
So the Enochian system was originally set up as a system for spying remotely.
Yes, and so there was. It wasn't an unscientific thought for the day. Okay,
sure.
It was a high tech idea, and but the magical techniques of the day. There were two major branches of magical technique that was popular in the day, and the one is Solomonic Magic, where you whip up an infernal spirit into a triangle and bamboozle it into thinking that you're God or one of God's henchmen, and then you order it to go bewitch your neighbor's cow or whatever. But there was another branch that fascinated Dee, and it comes under the very loose, generic title of Almadel Magic, and that you don't hide in a circle or whip a demon or a spirit into a triangle. you literally turn part of your house into holy ground, in the same way that the burning bush was holy ground in the story of Moses and the burning bush. And the technique was that you clean yourself up, take a bath, which is in and of itself was a crazy idea unless it was May. Yeah. And then you put on clean clothes and you feel all noble and holy, and you walk into a room that you've set aside and consecrated just for this kind of work, and it's all clean and swept up, and in the middle of the room is the Holy of Holies, which is a table, a magic table, usually with a hexagram or other devices drawn on it, and the magician places magical things, magical toys, whatever the particular magician is inspired by, is on the holy table. And then the magician falls down on his knees before this holy table and literally freaking whines to God for about an hour until he has a nervous breakdown.
Now, Lon, that's what interests me about Dee, is that he was such a learned man of mathematics, literature, philosophy, and navigation. I mean, the cynics of the time surely would have thought, how could such a learned man possibly preoccupy his time with the study of something like occultism? What do you think led to his pursuit of that? And in the same kind of vigor that he did for the more tangible science.
Well, it does to us right now. But in those days, where literally everyone had a literal interpretation of the Bible was to people as much of a scientific text as anything else printed, and not much else was printed. That if God did it for Moses and Esdras, and if he did it for Joshua, and if he did it for Aaron, then by God, you can do it for me, and it wasn't. Of course, he had to maintain a pretty low profile because he was stepping dangerously close to heresy and witchcraft. But until he crossed that line, magical endeavors were considered as scientific as any other thing in the imagination. So it wasn't too far out of the reservation by doing it. But the thing is, he could write wonderful, inspirational, long, whining prayers, but what he couldn't do is, I call it a nervous breakdown. Okay, the thing is that the technique is you got to throw yourself out of or into an altered state of consciousness, where by conversation with angels or God is not an irrational pursuit. So the technique, if you read kind of classic techniques of this type of magic, and at the moment this isn't Enochian magic, this is just Almadel holy table magic. Mm-hmm. But they start off with a confession that oh my God, oh I'm a worm, oh Almighty God, I'm a worm. I don't deserve the dirt that I eat. I'm lower in poop. Please, I don't deserve the air I breathe. And then alternately, after all of this self-abasement, you presume to penetrate into the very mind of God. So it's, I'm a worm, but I want to access the mind of God directly. And you go back and forth until you do. You have a little nervous breakdown. And in that nervous breakdown, theoretically, your rational mind is overcome, and you can talk directly to angels. Now, Dee could whine with the best of them, but he couldn't do the nervous breakdown thing. He couldn't do his left hemisphere of his brain was so focused and so engaged because of the brilliance of his intellect. I mean, his left hemisphere was so big that he probably had to wear custom hats. Okay, so he put an ad in the paper, or he advertised for right hemispheres.
And this is where Edward Kelly comes in.
And this is where Edward Kelly comes in. Dee tries out a couple of clairvoyants, and one of them worked pretty good, a guy named Hathaway. But for one reason or another, he couldn't hold on to one. And then one day, Edward Kelly appears at his door. And actually, at the time, he called himself Edward Talbert for some reason. And he eventually gives Talbert a try, and it seems to be the right formula. Dee's whining and note-taking, and Kelly's scrying, and it became a very, from one point of view, a very successful partnership, because Kelly supposedly made angelic contact with the very first time he was tried out, and Dee hired him on the spot, and for the next few years, these guys were partners. And for 3 of those years, or nearly 3 of those years, they were on this one particular project. And this project yielded diary material that was taken up in the 19th century by the Golden Dawn, and then Aleister Crowley. But I need to point out, and the reason that I wrote yet another Enochian magic book was the fact that the heavy stuff, the Enochian magic that modern magicians are doing today, was just developed from the material that was created in the last 90 days of their angelic workings together. And prior to that, there was 2 other distinct magical systems that produced some of the paraphernalia that we're familiar with today, but the Golden Dawn didn't comment on, and neither did Crowley. So we have this cream of the crop kind of system of visionary magic that was developed in the last 90 days. But all this time, we've more or less ignored the preparation process that Dee and Kelly went through in the years prior to that juicy material coming down.
And this is what your book, Enochian Vision Magick, goes into in some detail, isn't it?
Yes. And it's something that I sort of developed over a couple years of a very lengthy Enochian Magic class series here at the house. So primarily, the material was developed in 2 30-week magical classes.
Oh, one thing I was going to ask you before we go on to kind of like a definition of Enochian magic, was the actual system that Dee and Kelly developed. The tools they used were incredibly intricate, weren't they? I mean, could you describe a little bit, kind of what they used to receive this system?
Well, ultimately, or primarily, they used themselves. Early on in the angelic communications, I'll call them angels, okay? The angels told Dee and Kelly that they viewed them as one person, as one mind, and this may be a real big clue to their success. They represented, at least to the intelligences of the angelic intelligences, one unit, one intelligent unit. So they in themselves, the magic, the chemistry between these 2 men, was probably their greatest number one tool. But as I studied the original material in more detail, it became clear to me the nature of this angelic intelligence. And if you can imagine, I'm going to simplify it, to the extreme, just to prove my point. But Dee might ask the angels, "I'd like to know whether my friend Prince Lasky, over there in Poland, is going to be the next king of Poland. I'd like to find that out. Can you tell me that, Mr. Angel?" And in so many words, the angel answers back, "Oh, shit, yes, I can tell you that. But in order for us to communicate that to you in a way that you can understand, you're going to have to understand and experience how the universe was created in order to arrive at a place where there is a Poland, where there is a Prince Lasky, where there is a you. In other words, we're going to have to tell you how the universe is created, okay? Because this is, at least from our point of view." And they said, "It'll only take a minute." Yeah. And never listen to a spirit when they tell you anything about it's only going to take a minute.
The spirits were The spirits communicated with Dee and Kelly in a way that Dee was very, very familiar with. He was a cryptographer, and he was concerned with creating codes, very intricate codes. And the way that the angels communicated with Dee and Kelly was very much in that format, wasn't it? Could you give us a very brief idea of how that communication worked between the men and the angels?
Well, it's almost like the angels attempt to recreate, in a way that Dee could appreciate and understand, recreate the dynamics from the Big Bang all the way to where we're at right now, to the working universe that we have right now. And for that, they used alphanumeric squares. And Dee loved alphanumeric squares and ciphers that used alphanumeric squares. And even before Dee met Kelly, Dee was trying to decode the universe with alphanumeric squares. And one of the tools that he was using is this book, thing called the Book of Soyga, Soyga. And the Book of Soyga was, or included 49 pages of, each page had an alphanumeric square based on the zodiac and planets. Each of the 49 pages had a 49, or a alphanumeric square 49 by 49. And if you can imagine that, physically imagine that book would be a cube, 49 by 49 by 49, and each of the squares containing a number and a zodiacal or astrological figure of some kind. Now, even a simple alphanumeric square contains almost an infinite amount of information, or potential information. If you just do a square 3 by 3 and put numbers 1 through 9 and 9 planets in there, and a letter, all of a sudden it's all things. A is all things one-ish, and can you imagine how many things are one-ish? All things two-ish. Then you bring into to play the letter and the sound that the letter, or the human body has to make that sound, and then you bring in the fact of its relative position to all of the other alphanumeric squares and just that simple square, and all of a sudden, just with a 3 by 3 square, you have almost an infinite amount of potential information. Imagine the amount of information in a square, alphanumeric square cube, 49 by 49 by 49.
It's almost like a fractal, isn't it? Kind of fractal information.
It is fractal it grows like that, and coming out and going in.
Sure.
And I sort of picture it as if we could put the pre-Big Bang singularity under a microscope to see the potential information of a manifest universe all encoded in this cube. And of course, the Masons and the Hermeticists always say the cube pops open and becomes a cross, and all of that stuff.
Sure.
So it's Dee was already trying to discover the secrets of the universe in the Book of Soiga when Edward Kelly came knocking at the door. And so this tells us that Dee didn't want to receive a revelation. He didn't want to get his information from a burning bush. He didn't want a pretty angel to come down and stroke his hair and tell him the secrets of the universe. Dee saw the universe as a code that needed to be cracked.
So you
and
want
that was
tangible
the only
results.
way. Yeah. Now, I wish Dee had been a plumber or something else, because it makes it so hard for us mere mortals to, follow his things. But the angels started off right with that. They started building, having Dee and Kelly build lettered squares, full books of lettered squares, and then they would take those books and distill them down. Go to page 35 of this other book over here, and on column the 16th column in the 45th row, put that number or put that letter down. I mean, it was so tedious, and at every stage of their operations together, the angels started off with these massive amounts of alphanumeric squares that they distilled into smaller and smaller squares, and until finally they've got the letters down to a manageable number. And with those letters, they adorned physical pieces of furniture and things that they wore around their necks. And when it comes right down to it, the material that we've been familiar with seeing, the images like the Holy Table and the Lamen and the Sigillum de Mes, all of these very complex pieces of furniture and magical devices, when you put them together, they represent a working model, a miniature working model of the universe as it stands, the manifest universe as it stands. And right in the middle of this incredible machine, this model of the universe, that's where they set the black obsidian mirror that they look into while they do Enochian magic. The angels appear in the mirror like it's a monitor of of a big World Wide Web.
So, I mean, we keep using the word Enochian. Could we just go back a sec and actually discuss what Enoch is? You know, what Enochian is.
Well, who was Enoch?
Yeah,
we talk about Enoch and Enochian magic.
Yeah, Enoch.
Now, Enoch.
What was the eighth man from Adam or something like that?
Yeah.
Enoch was a biblical patriarch. Enoch was Noah's great-grandfather or something. He came really early, and Enoch, according to biblical mythology, Enoch walked with God and talked with God directly, and talked with God's angels directly. And that's exactly what Dee wanted to do. He just wanted to talk with angels. He says, I'm smart enough. I'm as smart as Enoch. I can talk with angels.
So who coined the term? Who actually coined the term Enochian? Was it Dee and Kelly, or was it the later sort of 19th century magicians who gave it that name because it was angelic magic?
It was, although Enoch played a part, and their search for the lost book of Enoch represented a big part of the second phase in their operation. They never called the language Enochian. Sure. They never viewed it as Enochian. This was something that came out of the imaginations of the Golden Dawn folks.
Okay, you mentioned
But
a
that's
language.
not to say-
You mentioned a language there, and I think that's an important thing to bring in now. Is that Dee and Kelly actually received not only cryptographic squares and all of that, but they actually received a language and an alphabet, which is said to be the alphabet and the language that is spoken by angels. Could you give us a little bit of information about that, please?
Yes. During their second phase, they were given a series of angelic calls, but these calls that they were given, and it took them a long time to receive these calls. They came from letters picked one by one from alphanumeric squares. But they didn't do anything with these calls, and they seemed to move on. It seemed like the exercise of receiving the calls was an exercise in attunement, just to hone Dee and Kelly's skills. But in the last 90 days, the period that modern magicians term as the Enochian period, they received yet another series of calls. And this time, they received translations of the calls. They received the calls first. In the book, I try to stress how incredibly bizarre their reception of these calls and the language that went with them were. It was more than a double-blind, triple-blind thing. They received. Well, it'd take up all of our time for me to just to tell you the wonder story of how they got this language. But once the calls were all received, and once the calls, and they received, letter by letter, and four of the calls were received letter by letter, running backwards and then played forward. Once they got the translation, they discovered that it was a real language, that nouns were nouns in all the calls. The same verbs were the same verbs. There was grammar. There was syntax. It's a real language. It's a mind-blowing thing.
And this puts people who say that it was all made up by Kelly and it's all just a big hoax. When you actually look at the way that this thing was received, and when you look and linguists have looked at Enochian and basically said, yeah, this really is a language with syntax. It's extraordinary to think that this was received out of nowhere.
Yeah, and it's, as far as I know, it is the most extraordinary and well documented magical event in history.
Sure.
And Donald Laycock, the famous linguist, he's not an occultist. Laycock was so fascinated by the whole thing that he took the time in the latter part of his life to write the complete Enochian dictionary. And here's coming from a man that's not even an occultist. I don't even know if he's a Mason. But anyway, it is very, very interesting. And in the last days, literally the last hours of Dee and Kelly's angelic operation, the angels explained how I got to back up a week or two. Okay, for their last days, the angels broke up the world into 91 parts of the earth, And here we're getting to the answer of the question. Is my friend Lasky going to be king of Poland?
Cut to the chase.
So, so finally, after years, the angels are saying, okay, now we've gotten to the point of where we can tell you where Poland is in all of this, And so they break up the world, and they give the what Englishmen would understand the parts of the earth to be. Well, this part is Egypt, okay, and this part is Syria, and then they say, but we call Syria Pascum. That's how the angels pronounce it, Pascum. Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. And in this last 90 days, they bring in alphanumeric squares. This time 4 big ones, 13 by 12, and then they fill these squares with little designs, little squiggly lines. They actually Kelly hallucinates the lines right on the things, and he drives these skinny lines. And then the angels dictate these letters from left to right, coming down, fill them with letters, some of them capitalized, some of them not capitalized. And by the time they're all filled up, they realize that these squiggly lines all start with a capital letter, and they spell out a 7-lettered name, and these 7-letter names are the names of these 91 parts of the earth. That in itself is a mind-blowing thing. But in the last day of the communications, the angels say, "Oh, by the way, the names of the parts of the earth, those are also the names of governors that rule 30 heavens."
It's ongoing.
And D doesn't know how to handle it. He starts an argument with these angels. He says, "Oh my God, you trying to tell me that everything in heaven and earth is connected to everything else in heaven and earth?"
Sounds familiar.
And they're going, well, hell yes, we are. And D his mind is blown, and he gets snitty with the angel, and the angel finally says, "Look, you guys, you got everything you need. You got the language. You've got the big key. We've taken almost 3 years of your life to show you the design and the theory and the blueprint for a Ferrari. Not only that, in these last 90 days, we've told you how to build the Ferrari. You've got enough. Get in the car and turn the key yourself, And, they never did it.
No, that's interesting.
After they were given perhaps the key to a wonderful formula of magic. The car was there. The key was in the ignition. And these guys got so tired of each other during this whole thing that they said, "Screw it, let's move on to something else." But thank goodness the material survived.
In your book, you spell out 3 different sections: the ring, the Laman, and the holy table. Could you talk a little bit about those for us?
Well, this is very, very early on. The angel said, "Well, before you're going to start doing any of this magic, you got to have the Ring of Solomon." And there was a very dramatic vision where the angel had this fiery ring of gold, and he threw it through the table, and it fell on the floor. But they gave a design. It's kind of a simple design. It's in the book. And they said, without this ring, you should do nothing. So right off the bat, they're saying, whatever the virtues of this ring is to do our stuff, you need to have this ring on. And it's a simple enough statement, and it's straightforward enough that during the second of these 30-week classes that I did, I made up a bunch of paper rings, and we didn't do any magic without first putting that ring on. Second one was the holy table and the lamen. Now the lamen and the holy table were constructed through the distillation of alphanumeric squares, and the lamen is almost a miniature version of the holy table, and the holy table has all these dynamics of the universe. It has a lot of moving parts, and the lamen, which is worn over the breast of the magician, is built from the same alphanumeric squares, but there is it is not symmetrical, and it's kind of hard. It's easy to show in the book with a couple diagrams, but suffice to say that each of these Enochian letters represent an angelic force, and when put together, they spell the names of 7 sets of 7 angels, and the highest of the 2 in each set is the prince and the king. So there's like a prince and a king of the sun, and a prince and the king of Venus. And the holy table is set up in such a way that it reflects the perfect match of king and prince. In other words, it's perfectly tuned. It's like I keep going back to an automobile. It's like an automobile engine that's perfectly tuned.
Well, let's jump forward a little bit. Dee and Kelly have created this amazing machine, and they've received all this incredible information, and it's almost like John Dee was all for the thrill of the chase, and when he'd finally got the final pieces of information, he lost interest and went off and did something else. So that information kind of kicked around for a while, for a long time. A lot of it was lost for a while, wasn't it? And then it was sort of mysteriously found, and then taken up by the founders of the Golden Dawn. So I think maybe it'd be a good time to sort of start looking at how people actually started to use and work with this information that Dee and Kelly never seemed to have actually worked with once they'd got hold of it. So could you tell us a little bit about the Golden Dawn and how people like MacGregor Mathers got hold of this information and sort of syncretized it along with a lot of other Hermetic stuff?
Right. Well, the Golden Dawn was this marvelous organization that succeeded quite well in synthesizing centuries of Hermetic thought and practice into a very workable initiatory system, and it was a system that was based on very comfortable and recognizable and cozy Kabbalistic principles that saw the universe, saw the macrocosm as being broken up into four major categories, corresponding to the 4 letters of the great name Yod He Vav He, and that gave us the point of view of 4 Kabbalistic worlds, the archetypal world and the creative world, and then the world of formation, and then the material world. And those have their reflections in the human soul, starting at the bottom with the physical body and the animal soul, and then the intellect, and then the creative part, and then the life force itself. And it's just so easy to think about the fundamentals of fire, water, air, and earth, and the creation of the macrocosmic things broken up into the signs of the zodiac and the planets and the elements, and how all of this springs from the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And in other words, it's this marvelous structure, a schema that the Golden Dawn could literally is a filing cabinet. The Golden Dawn could classify any form of spiritual thought or level of consciousness into this very, very convenient system that, based on the tree of life and the 10 sephiroth of the tree of life and the 22 paths.
So they managed they managed to meld together the two systems. They found enough common ground with the angelic stuff and sort of bolted it together with the Kabbalistic Hermetic stuff and made a working system from it.
Yeah, what I'm saying is they found a little bit of the Enochian material that fit their matrix.
Sure.
Okay, just a little bit of it, but it's that little bit that I described right toward the last there with those 4 tablets with 13 by 12 squares. They ended up calling those elemental tablets.
Yeah.
And they assigned the idea to fire, water, air, and earth on those. And they saw how easily that they could split those tablets into 4 sections, and the big cross that split them had 36 squares, which is just perfect for the 36 decans of the zodiac. And each of those little squares or subangles they could subdivide to fit all of their nice, neat little very anal retentive hermetics of the Golden Dawn. They could squeeze it all, and where they couldn't squeeze it, they made it. They made it fit.
So they used a small amount of the Enochian system, but in your book, you deviate from that because you've written books before about the sort of the Golden Dawn system of working Enochian. But what's different about your latest book is that you put forward a system of Enochian working which deviates quite sort of dramatically from the accepted manner of Enochian working that we're all used to.
Dean Kelly's system, as far as I believe, is very intensely Christian, and you're coming at it from a thelemic standpoint. It's just how does that differ?
Well, the Golden Dawn may have projected a more mystical Christianity flavor to it, but I haven't done anything overtly thelemic with it at all. I'm just having the system as the system. I haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater. I firmly believe that Enochian magic is developed by the Golden Dawn and Mathers and Crowley works absolutely perfectly well right out of the Golden Dawn box. What I'm saying is they ignored a great deal of very important, very, very empowering material that comes before that. So kind of the centerpiece of my book is just this little ritual of preparation whereby you activate the holy table, activate the lamen, and you get yourself in tune with that holy table, and then you go on and do your Golden Dawn type elemental or etheric magic. And I'm saying this from someone that practiced Golden Dawn magic, Enochian magic out of the box for 25 years, and then once I more or less figured out this little preparation process, prefaced all my Enochian work with this little preparation ritual that utilizes this stuff, and I have to tell you, it's like the difference between black and white and Technicolor.
Well, I've actually done that because I was at your talk earlier on this year in London, and we actually went through that process, and it was extremely powerful. One of the things that I wanted to ask you quickly was we've talked a lot about the reception of the Enochian system and so forth. We haven't really touched on why anybody would actually want to do Enochian magic. If I decided, or somebody decides to pick up your book, what are they looking to get from working Enochian magic?
That's the best question to ask and the hardest question to answer. I drove my publisher crazy by having 2 prologues to the book, and the second prologue was simply called Why Magic. You know? You can answer the same or ask the same question about Enochian magic or any kind of magic, but just why magic anyway? You know?
Sure.
And I wish that I could say, well, gentlemen, this is going to bring you a greater measure of health and wealth and spiritual well-being. Yeah, you're going to gain spiritual enlightenment with it. You know, I can't tell you any of that. Okay, I don't even know why I am attracted to this kind of activity and behavior as my spiritual form of expression.
But that's an
I
interesting
really
that's an interesting thing that you say there, because a lot of magic could be construed as results magic. So you do a magical ritual for a specific result that might manifest in the real world. For instance, like goetic magic, you would summon a spirit to go do something for you. But Enochian Vision Magic is about having personal mystical visions which give you more insight into life. Would you say that was a fair assessment or not?
Oh, absolutely. It's magic that works. This works on you.
Sure.
And everybody has their own private vocabulary of images that trigger certain things in their own lives, in their own souls. And so when we do like Enochian scry and aether in a group, which is not the best way to do it, but it's a good way to get started. Everybody sees a little bit of different vision. Some see drastically different things, but for the most part, when we start to examine it, there's a thread of commonality in the visions, as if we've opened up temporarily in the room a magical environment, a specific, very focused and narrow level of consciousness. By doing our chanting and our opening and reciting the calls, it's as though we're all taking the same drug.
Sure.
And until that drug wears off, we're all sort of on the same trip, you know. And so but I make the point that magic, just magic as it is an art, and it's an art form. It's a spiritual art form, and there are people who are drawn. There are people who are artists at heart. You know, you can't really, ask a great ballet dancer or a great operatic singer, or you can't really ask a sculptor or a painter, well, why are you an artist? You know, why throw your life away?
Yeah,
you could be selling real estate.
Yeah, sure.
And they usually they can't tell you, or if they're telling you, they're probably not getting down to the core of what the truth of the matter is. You don't know why you're an artist. You just
got to do it.
Yeah.
You've been quoted as saying that you can only change one thing with magic yourself. Do you therefore see magic as having a limited effect on objective reality, or no effect on objective reality? And if so, what are your reasons for taking that stance?
My definition or my understanding of objective reality is fluctuates from microsecond to microsecond anyway. But speaking for myself, I can say, at least on one level, and be truthful, that yes, I affect my objective reality through magic all the time. And I don't know if we could take a videotape of things and say, well, that happened because he did magic, or that didn't happen because he didn't do magic. But it's a part of my life as much as breathing in and out is part of my life. And I I no longer separate or divorce what I think is a magical act and what is just a mundane act of me going about my daily life. Yeah, it's all become magic. I don't even, interpret from moment to moment. Oh, this is the reaction of my stumbling star ruby this morning. It's all magic, and in a way, I think if someone had my attitude without my experiences and my and what I've gone through with life, if someone just had my attitude toward how I view every moment and every phenomena in my life, I think they might be diagnosed as being insane, or certainly not. Perhaps I'm just insane in a very socially acceptable way.
Well, I've always thought that magic is kind of controlled schizophrenia in some way.
Yeah, that's kind of the point I'm making. Well, if you study Crowley, you're not just studying one Crowley. You're studying about 50 Crowleys, and he writes certain things from the point of view of the level of consciousness that he was when he is Per de Rabo, and he's writing and doing work in his capacity as the Master Therian. So in a way, it's telling us that as we climb the tree of life, as the Golden Dawn would like us to see our evolution in consciousness, as we climb the tree of life, we don't stop being the degree level we've just come out of. Part of us remains there, and that's kind of the idea, is to, in a way, perfect who you are right now, rebalance yourself, make yourself a healthy Lon. Here's Lon on the telephone here, okay? But as you achieve higher levels of consciousness, you've got a well-trained Lon here on the phone, making a living and trying to be pleasant, and but at the same time, I have I've achieved higher levels of consciousness. I have achieved certain degrees, okay, and it's nothing that has anything to do with paperwork or belonging to any organization or anything, okay, and I never stop. I never lose the Lon that's on the phone. When I become Lon who can astrally project, or the Lon that has a relationship with my angel. Yeah. You never stop being all of your grades, and in a way that's like controlled schizophrenia. It really is. But and I think the idea of it, as I wrote this goofy book called Chicken Kabbalah of Rabbi Lamed Ben Clifford, and in the Chicken Kabbalah, I more or less state that Kabbalistic thought is meant to make you go crazy in a very socially acceptable way, but at the very end of that craziness is absorption into Godhead, and I kind of think that's how it is. That's why I'm not. I'm happy to be very eclectic in my magic, and the older I get, the less differentiation I observe between all of these things.
Thanks a lot for coming back on the show, Lon. I've really enjoyed having you on. It's been really good learn about all this kind of stuff. It's good of you. Do you have any projects that you're working on at the moment that you could tell us about?
Oh, sure. I've got a couple like media projects. I just kind of finished up being part of this DVD series called The Great Work, and kind of excited about that. And
can you tell us a little bit?
Produced by the same people that produced the Magical Egypt series that I also was a part of, and it's a series of 5 or 6 DVDs that sort of outline the fundamentals and the formula of initiation, and it's sort of almost set up like a little initiatory experience, and I'm just one of about 7 people, including John Anthony West, the Egyptologist, and other people that try to bring initiation, the concept of initiation, classical concept into the modern day. So I'm excited about that, and I'm working on a book called Low Magic.
That sounds interesting.
Low Magic, redeeming the better demons of your nature, and in a way, it's turning out kind of as My Life with the Spirits Part 2. Get to tell little stories. It's very anecdotal, and kind of the centerpiece is a story of my exorcism of one of the oldest Catholic girls' schools in the United States.
Ah. So, are you going to be doing any more classes for the Maybe Logic Academy?
I'm doing one right now.
Oh, you're in the middle of one at the moment.
I'm in the middle of one, and I'm going to be repeating my initiation class, I think, in January. And then, if they still love me after the second round of that initiation class, I'm working right now on the text of classes for an Enochian class.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Yeah, definitely. Well, Lon, thanks again for coming on. We always enjoy having you on the show, and it's it's a great honour to be able to talk to you. And we'll have to get you back on when your new book comes out.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Thanks, Lon.